Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Talking Throttle with me, Alex. Funnily enough today, I've started recording and I've set everything up and then my phone decides not to work on me. I basically got a message saying I've maxed out my storage, which is crazy because God, I wasn't using that much, but here we are. Apparently I am using too much. So it's either a case of I spend time sorting that out or I just record, the podcast itself and just make do with what I've got. So I've decided to prioritize the podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, it is race weekend. It's race weekend, which we love. And not only is it a race weekend, guys, but it's a sprint race weekend, which we love and adore. So with it being a sprint race, if you're not familiar with how a sprint race is broken down, it is similar to like a normal race weekend, but it's like a little mini race before the actual race. So in a normal race weekend, you'd have like practice 1, 2 and 3, and then you'd have qualifying and then the race. In this instance, in a race weekend, in a sprays, I've done it again, right, third time lucky, okay, in a space, what, am I going mad? What is it called now? Sprint, that's the one, right, in a sprint race weekend, got that. You've got practice 1, then you've got the sprint qualifying, sprint race, normal race qualifying, and then the actual race, which is brilliant. It's more racing action for us fans, and it's more opportunities for drivers to get points in a championship, which, by the way, might I add, is incredibly tight. But here we are. With the McLaren boys so tight and so far ahead at the same time. I think they're like ahead by 238 points. But for all teams involved, all teams on the grid, I mean, it's grabbing points where you can, I think. Because I think aside from McLaren, I don't think any teams really had it plain sailing this season so far. So that's something to bear in mind. Now, with the current season the way it is at the moment, I've decided to title this podcast The McLaren Boys because I think for the first time in years, McLaren is now at the front and centre of Formula One again. The last time they won a championship was with Lewis Hamilton in his early career in 2008. So it's been a good few years for McLaren themselves, but they've, in the space of a 3-year period, they've gone from being like midfield, like fighting with the Alpines. And then obviously they've rectified themselves, they've brought themselves back to life. Now, with that being said, I wanted to focus on their drivers in particular because I think for both of these drivers, both very talented drivers with basically very quick cars. I think for them too, it's going to come down to every single race. Now, neither of which has won a world championship before. Lando Norris has been driving for McLaren a little bit longer than Oscar Piastri has. So some would argue that he has a few more years experience than Oscar does. Whereas Oscar is obviously he's been in Formula One for a few seasons now, but you could still consider him to be a little bit young. And people kind of project him to have a few world championships in his pockets based on how he's performing at the moment, which I think, to be fair, it's totally valid. Like, I see it fine. Lando Norris is a British driver and Oscar Piastri is an Australian driver. Australian fans haven't seen a championship winner or a champ like for years. Like, they haven't seen it in a very long time, and the Aussies are very passionate about the sport, and that goes without saying, considering what we've seen come out of Australia, whether that be Mark Webber, even Daniel Ricciardo for that matter, like, and so much more. British fans, are very particular about British drivers. Like, they want to see British drivers ahead. With that being said, I'm just going to be brutally honest with it, because if I'm going to be anything, like, I just have to be honest. And my opinion on the McLaren boys is that I think one is doing a little bit better at the moment. I think that's because, and when I say one, I'm referring to Oscar, because Oscar kind of, there hasn't been a time where, aside from what happened at the British Grand Prix, which I cannot understand why he did this, but we'll get into it in a moment. I think Piastri's the better driver under pressure, whereas Norris, I think Norris could have been further ahead than he is now if he hadn't made the mistakes that he has made already this season. But that comes from being younger drivers anyway. You're going to make more mistakes. Whereas I say that Norris doesn't drive well under pressure. Looking at what happened at the British Grand Prix, Piastri was ahead by a long mile. Safety car was out because, it's Silverstone, it's raining here, it's not raining there. And he decided to I don't know why he did it, but he basically brake tested Max under a safety car, which I don't understand. Like, from what I could see, it's like he slammed on his brakes, which you don't need to because you're under a safety car and you can't go over a certain speed anyway. And it was just kind of awkward. So then that rewarded Oscar with a 10-second place penalty, which then allowed Norris to kind of gain as much time, get as close to Piastri as he possibly could, so that after Piastri had his 10-second penalty taken off, obviously like Lando's in second, so he'll take the first spot. So Lando won the last race, but he did win it because Piastri had that penalty. If Piastri didn't have that penalty, it would have been Piastri's win. So that's how tight and that's how narrow it is. But then with that being said, we have got two young drivers here that I think Piastri is more consistent, whereas Norris perhaps is not so much so, but both of them can make mistakes that will cost them a lot. I wouldn't say either one of them are like Lewis or Max caliber, because they're very like dedicated drivers and it's very rare that you see them make mistakes. I think time will tell. They have to go through these lessons in order to kind of move forward. Some fans have pointed out that, you know, Norris has been driving for a lot longer than Piastri, so a lot of fans are potentially suggesting that if Norris doesn't get his championship now, there's a chance he may never do so. And other fans suggesting, you know, well, Piastri's a lot younger, he's showing like brilliant talent. He's the type of driver we'd see to have more than one championship win in him, which I would agree with if there wasn't massive regulation changes coming next season, but that's another conversation. So I think it is going to come down to the last race on this one. It's similar to 21, like it's going to come down to the final race of the season. One of them is going to be missing out on that top prize, and I don't think it matters whether it will be Piastri missing out or whether that's going to be Norris missing out. Either way, it is going to be quite like heartfelt, bittersweet almost for the fans, because you know you don't want to see two drivers battle it out and then one of them inevitably is going to be left heartbroken. But we'll see what happens with that one. Now that we've covered the McLaren boys, I wanted to revisit a few bits of news that we've heard over the past couple of weeks, because it has been a few weeks since we went racing and I am in a drought. I'm not happy about it. I'm bored, okay? So let's look at the important headlines going into the race weekend this week. So first things first, we've already covered it on the podcast before, but this weekend is going to be the first race weekend for Red Bull without Christian Horner. Now, it's important to note that Christian was with Red Bull for about 20 years, so he was there for like a while. There for a good few years, so it's going to be a cultural change as well. Now, it's going to be interesting to see how the team perform overall in terms of strategy and decision making and just overall performance, but then also it will be interesting to see how I don't want to count Yuki out, and I don't want to say no, like it's not really about Yuki, but in terms of like competing for the championship, I'm sorry, but Max has done it by himself before, and if he had the car that he's always had in the past couple of years, like he could have very easily done it again this year. It's just unfortunate that the car is really slow. So with that being said, it's interesting to see how Max performs this weekend, but then also let's not pretend or let's not forget that there have been rumours flying around that he's in talks with Mercedes. Some people have been like tracking flights. It's crazy to see that people have been getting the like flight logs up and there's pictures allegedly of Max and Toto coming off the plane together. Some form of indication that they've had conversations. Now, from doing my own research, I can see that there are some news outlets reporting that they have and confirming that they have had talks, i.e. Max and Mercedes, but there's other articles suggesting that it is all just pure speculation. So some people are confirming it, some people are not. So as I stand at the moment, I don't know. But because Red Bull have made such a massive decision to get rid of Christian Horner, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether the talks with Mercedes continue, whether Max decides to leave Red Bull nonetheless, whether he decides, you know what, even though you got rid of Christian, it's still not enough for me. We're sitting down watching this thinking, okay, like, are we going to get an unexpected announcement here? Like, we're all kind of like just almost waiting for something to get said at this point. I don't think that's going to come anytime soon, because I think Max is not a silly guy. I think he's going to want to see how the team's performing without the old, chief and boss. So there's a few other teams that we want to pay attention to this weekend. let's not forget Kick Saber's performance at the British Grand Prix, which was absolutely historic. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I've seen it face to face. I've seen it with my own two eyes. It was perfect. Nico Hulkenberg managed to secure his first podium in nearly 20 years of driving in F1. Obviously, I want to focus on Nico Hulkenberg's performance, but I also want to zone in on Saber, their performance as a team. Kick Saber are going to be taken over by Audi next year. Audi are a very successful team in motorsport. How they perform in Formula One, I mean, we're starting to see improvements with Saber at the moment. I think it's the first podium they've ever got in about 13 years, which is just crazy. Saber are the fourth highest scoring team at the moment. How they perform in Formula One, I mean, we're starting to see improvements with Saber at the moment. I think in the past 4 races, I think they've got 35 points, which doesn't sound a lot, but going into the weekend, keep an eye out for some Kick Saber again. I wouldn't be surprised if I expect them to kind of come out of normal qualifying at least in the top 10, but the sprint weekend is going to be what makes a difference here. Hamilton won the sprint in China, but then on the actual race day, both Ferraris ended up not finishing the race with no points due to car failures. Sometimes it's different results, and that's the best thing about a sprint weekend, is that you never really know. It's never consistent, so to speak. So keep an eye out for Kick Saber. Keep an eye out for Nico Hulkenberg. Gabriel Bortoleto, he's one of my favourite rookies this season. He's doing really well and he is massively improving. And as I say, Kick Saber, this car itself used to be fighting for like 20th, 19th, 18th. I'm more excited to see where else they go with this car, because I expect big things from Saber. We'll have to see. Aside from Saber, there's another team that I think is important that we pay attention to. I wouldn't be a fan of this team if I didn't mention them at least, and that's Ferrari, because you know I don't play about my Ferrari. But let's be real for a second, and this is not me being biased, and I'm putting my bias aside for this, but Ferrari is seriously picking up pace. Like, we're talking about a team, as I mentioned earlier, second race of the season in China, both cars did not finish. This team has managed to climb their way up. Despite having both cars not score points in that race, they managed to climb their way up into second place in the constructors behind McLaren. As the weeks have gone by, if you look at where, it doesn't matter which driver, if you look at the highest position that was achieved by either Ferrari driver, whether that be Lewis or Charles, as the weeks go on, they are getting better and better. We're talking about 8th, 9th, 5th, 6th, and then we're starting to go into 4ths. I would expect at some point, I don't know what weekend it's going to be at or what weekend it's going to be, but I expect a Ferrari podium within the next 2 races at least. I think as a team, they have been focusing solely on like a new rear suspension, which I think is supposed to like deal with the handling issues that Charles and Lewis were reporting before. So hopefully that will calm that down. But I think from what I've seen at the British Grand Prix is that they're picking up pace, which is the most important thing. And the question that I have, potentially not this season, and I'm almost daring to say the next, despite the regulation changes and things like that, but with all of this being said and done, could Ferrari be a genuine threat to other Formula One teams? Like, a lot of people think, oh, it's Ferrari, like they haven't won a championship in years. Granted, they haven't seen as much success as they used to do historically, but could this be the return of Ferrari? I don't know. As I said to you earlier, I'm a Ferrari fan, and if you are a Ferrari fan, then you know not to get your hopes up, because you'll get your hopes up and then your heart will just break by the end of the weekend. So it's all speculation, it's all just thoughts, but of course I'd love to see Ferrari become a major threat to other teams, because I think they've got it in them. Take McLaren out of the equation. Lewis and Charles as a dynamic is naughty, because you've got an 8-time world champion, said what I said, against a basically Ferrari's legacy boy. He's driving Ferraris for years. He has been their poster boy since he pretty much joined into Formula One. So you've got a real good team there. And I think whether it be this season or the next one, hopefully people get listened to, i.e. drivers, strategy team, wake the hell up. And Ferrari can do what I know that they need to do and what they can do. I think there are a few things to pay attention to this weekend, but I also think it's going to be an exciting one. Something tells me in my gut that this is going to be a really exciting race weekend, but we'll have to see. So keep an eye out for Red Bull, see how they perform this weekend. Kick Sabre, again, they've had a crazy trajectory. They've been getting faster and faster, and as I said, going from like 20th to a podium spot in the space of a few races is absolutely bizarre. But here we are. Ferrari, as I said, they are picking up pace. I think they could be a real threat for the other top three teams, whether that be McLaren, Red Bull, and even Mercedes if you want to. And then finally, the McLaren boys. I don't know where it's going to go between the two of them. I think it will be Piastri, because Piastri is more consistent. He tends to make less mistakes while in the car and under pressure, bar what's just happened at the British Grand Prix. And as I said, I have to be honest, I love Lando Norris. I think he's a brilliant driver, but if I'm going to be like straight up blunt and honest, I need to tell him that, like, I say need to tell him, like, you know, like I know him personally, but Norris needs to wake up. Like, this is now or never type moment. It's like either you're going to do it or you're not. Norris really should have won the championship last year. They allowed Norris to go above Piastri in that particular race, then Norris would have been ahead of Max in the championship, and with a couple of races left to go, I think it would have been a case where it would have been tight, but Norris could have done it. But that's just because McLaren didn't prioritise their drivers. And to be fair, their team principal's been very honest. He said, like, I don't want to choose over the two boys, you know, I want it to be equal. I want the boys to fight it out, and so it should be. You know, you don't really want to prioritise anybody, especially when you've got two, you know, genuine like pieces of talent there. But Piastri, I think he can keep his cool. Norris needs to wake up a little bit. He's got the he's got the talent, he's got the ability, he's got the car. He just needs to know that every time he gets into the car, he needs to tune everybody else out. Because if you can't manage that, then I don't understand how you can be a world champion if you can't handle the pressure. That's the whole point of being a champion. But that's me being really harsh. But I think at this point for Norris, I think somebody does need to be really harsh with him, because yeah, you're a brilliant driver, you're a brilliant talent, but this isn't going to be handed to you. If you want it, you're going to have to fight for it. On that note, it's likely going to be an audio piece this week, but I'm going to try my very best to record the rest of the video before it got cut off. Please, guys, if you are listening to Spotify and Apple Music, please, by all means, like it, subscribe to it, leave a review. Leave a review for me if you liked it. If you don't like it, then yeah, I don't know what to say to you, if I'm being honest. Like, it is what it is. But yeah, I appreciate you spending your time with me again. I'm very much looking forward to the Belgian Grand Prix this weekend. Please do stay tuned to my TikTok channels just to see my immediate reactions to any news that comes out, any events that happen over the weekend. But let's have a good race week, and if anything, I will catch up with you next week. So guys, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.